Welcome to the Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. Today we are back again with Dr. Jay Wamsted, the educator from down south Atlanta, bringing some heat to the show tonight. We got so much to talk about. We have not talked in a while. One of the points of the discussions that we have, Jay, is to talk across lines of difference. But we took a few weeks off, and I can't imagine a better time to come back to talking across lines of difference, for one, as a just as a frame, and then two, so much around kind of race relations and race issues, which seem to just never go away. I mean, they're rooted in who we are, but they pop up all the time. You wrote a piece recently that was titled "A Simple Way to Self-Monitor for Bias." So I want to talk a little bit about that. We should talk about that. And then we had a different starting point that we might start on that we both talked about, which is this article, Chicago Teachers Union push to reopen schools that is rooted, they say it's rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. So anyways, with that as a frame, let's just tackle like, how are you doing? And welcome back, and what's up?
That is quite a frame you just threw out there. Um, yeah, I'm pretty good. I got a haircut. Anybody that's seen me before, I got a beard cut. My students are every time I get a haircut or a beard cut, 50% of my students love it and 50% hate it. So I never really get any good feedback from it. So
Well, that is good feedback.
is it?
Yeah, that's expert feedback. We hate it, we love it. Well, cool. You can please no one.
Thank you, teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're just getting along here. It's one of those reasons I'm interested in talking about schools, and we have had just a roller coaster ride the past couple of weeks where we came back in January and immediately they started shutting schools down for lack of staffing. And it was just individual school, and then they shut the whole system down for a week. And we're the 43rd biggest school district in the country. I mean, we're a big district. And we just went back yesterday or 2 days ago for the first time after that week off. And so it's just, and our cases are spiking, and it's just a lot of drama here. And so I can appreciate what's going on in Chicago, except it's much colder there. So I know they've got their own issues. But anyway, that's me. That's where I am. Frame us up with this. This tweet that the Chicago the teachers union sent out, right? Isn't that what happened?
Yeah, so I saw it on Twitter, but it was being shared widely by multiple groups of folks
Yeah.
in my feed, and most of them, to be very honest with you, were mocking the headline. So the headline is: the Chicago Teachers Union. They say that the push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. No one has fought harder to keep kids out of the classroom than teachers unions. This is from Reason. So Reason is a libertarian organization. I obviously read them, but if you needed me to find the exact same headline, you could find the headline in a left-leaning and a right-leaning publication. I think this has in some ways been universally panned as a strategic. It's what the Chicago Teachers Union does. They find the best possible frame for their agenda, for something that they're attempting to make happen, and then you just slap white supremacy, misogyny, racism, and sexism on it. And listen, I am as much as the next person willing to call out racism, sexism, all those isms, because it is a thing. It exists in the world. You look at it, you can see it. There's no way to look at the news every night and not see that these things exist. But then you have to cry foul sometimes when, can I just quickly tell you one problem I have with this, and then, I'll ask you what you think about it from the teacher's perspective?
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to say one thing is what I thought was super interesting is that they slapped that tweet out and then a day later just took it down. So it really was just a provocation, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I think you're
pro. So this is an African American second in charge within the CTU that they have pictured here. Black woman,
okay.
second in charge. Every time since Karen Lewis has been gone, they trot her out to be the face of the thing. One of the reasons for that is because the president who replaced Karen Lewis, is a white male who
Yeah, I saw that.
is married into the 1%. His wife is the heiress of the Royal Caribbean line of ships, right? So
Okay.
I mean,
Sure.
it just makes for such weird racial white progressive theater to me, and and the using of this person as kind of like, let's frame this the right way. Let's make it about racism. Let's make it about white supremacy and white
Yeah.
people. Let's hide the white president and send the black woman out to be the kind of decoyed shield to lift the fist in the air and get the photo op. It's bothersome to me, especially when so many parents. I'm not one of them. I just want to be clear. There are many parents that want their kids back in school ASAP and need them to be for many
Yeah.
reasons that are much more desperate than I'll ever know. I'm not one of those parents, but I can honestly feel like there should be some democracy here, where the unions and the district and the parents are on equal footing to say whether or not kids go back to school. And in this way, it just
Mm.
feel like I dropped out. Sorry about that. I got super excited. Hit the button and I'm gone, man. I'm
You're
out.
like you're like
So,
that character from Inside Out. Like your brain exploded and everything shut down.
so what do you
Um.
think?
Well, I saw. I did. I looked. I first like looked into some demographics in Chicago, and it was kind of what I expected, which is why I had a hard time with the racism piece just off the blush, because I don't know, something like 83% of Chicago public school students are black and brown, and I was surprised that like something like 60% of the teachers were black and brown too, which I I mean, that's a pretty fair number in America, I guess. Um, so it didn't seem to me as cut and dried as just calling out racism on one side or the other. And you what you said is absolutely true. Is that like there are parents like all across the spectrum, like that want their kids back, that don't want their kids back, and that cuts across racial lines.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. I don't know that it cuts across economic lines as much, and maybe that should have been the tweet. I think the more money you have, the more you're desperate for your kid to get back in the building. That's what I've seen. Um,
And how much you like your children.
I
Because I think some people may have discovered they don't like their kids as much as they thought they did when the pandemic started. I mean, I've joked about it. I kind of only half joking that, maybe some people kind of they planned the number of kids they were going to have predicated on the idea that someone else was going to take care of them most days. That
yeah.
not
What?
24-hour parenting.
And I think that lines up with money, though. What I said. I mean, like the more comfortably upper middle class and above you are, the more you're not used to having your kids in the room all the time because they're always at camp, they're always at sports, they're always at school or after school activities or this or that or the
So,
other.
do you think that Janice Jackson, leader of the Chicago Public Schools, black woman,
Hmm.
her call to get kids back in school as quickly as possible is rooted in racism, sexism, and misogyny?
I so I confess to not understanding that particular argument. I think no, I don't. I think that
No.
there's a racial element that I've noticed in the call to get back to schools, which is when white parents co-opt black and brown children and slap them on their campaign to get back in schools. And we got to get back in schools for the black and brown kids, but really they're talking about their kids. They want their kids back in school, and they're it's almost a kind of a colonialist mindset. Like, oh, these black and brown kids need to get back in school. We need to get them back in school. But but it's not based in asking them or bringing them onto the campaign. It's a campaign of white parents like trying to get the schools open and thrusting black and brown children as like almost like the poster children. But that doesn't seem to be what's going on here, I guess is my point. I
Mm-mm.
don't.
I mean, it's such a messy situation just in this one way. It's like very messy in that black students are the most likely to be doing all remote
Yep.
right now. They're the white students are more likely than anyone else to have in person right now. Non-urban areas are more likely to be doing in person than urban areas. Um, in some cases, people of color and definitely black people are the most suspicious about putting their kids back in the schools right away.
Yeah.
And some of them are they're more likely to be frontline workers and workers in the economy that require them to need to be able to have their kids somewhere every day. It's just messy.
Yeah.
There's no like easy answers, which is why I've kind of sat this one out in terms of having like a hard opinion. I do know that I just don't think that teachers unions should be running the show on deciding who gets to be in school and who doesn't.
I I will say, and again, I've said to you many times, like we don't have a union here, so I'm not very familiar with that dynamic, right? But I I can relate a little bit to a little bit of feeling of powerlessness, I guess, as a teacher, just in terms of we're really beholden to not even a board down here. We're in my district. We're just kind of beholden to the superintendent. I mean, he's beholden to the board in terms of they can fire him, but they don't vote on his decisions. I mean, he really like just he's a CEO and he runs things, and they can fire him or not, and that's pretty much it. And so we have like little power about anything, which doesn't bother me for the most part. I feel very, 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 very at peace with my job and everything. But I will say that like right now, it's just, I don't envy anybody in Chicago, I guess, in this situation, because I know a lot of teachers that have some classes that are overcrowded. And I don't love those classes as much as I love my classes where half the kids stayed home and half the kids came, and it's more of a 10 and 10, 15 and 15 situation, you know? And so
teachers might be getting used to, I think, in some ways, smaller class sizes or a different way of working and teaching. It's been a year now. So
yeah,
the idea that we would just all go back to in person, I think part of the assumption is that teachers want to do that. The first assumption is that parents want to do that, but the second assumption is that educators haven't changed at all in this last year, haven't gotten accustomed to maybe teaching from remotely, and maybe the idea
yeah.
of going back isn't just about safety. Maybe it's like, listen, you know,
Let's
like I'm,
just,
I'm kind of enjoying not having to be around your little rugrats all day every day. You know, like it could just. I mean, listen, that could be wrong, but human beings, when they do the same thing over a period of time, it becomes habit forming. So imagine a year of teaching a certain way and being told, yeah, now just go back, right? Like to how things work. Maybe some are waiting for that. Maybe some teachers want that. I don't
I
know.
mean, I think as with any large group of people, like there's going to be some bad actors, right? But I definitely like, I definitely think that it's just not an easy situation. Like I think so. Atlanta City's doing this right now, where they're in the process of reopening. They've been closed since March, and they just allowed kindergarten and do second. It feels just it doesn't feel timed well, I guess, and that's how I feel about Chicago too. It's like
Hmm.
it's like there's just this insane spike going on nationally, and certainly here in Atlanta. And so for them to now decide they're going to try to go back, I would be scared too if I was one of those teachers. I guess that's my point.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I'll tell you this much. It is messy, as we're saying right now. I'm sick of it. To be very honest with you, you know where I stand. I just wish that the systems would give me the per pupil allotment for my children and let me buy what I need for my kids in terms of education. Because I am sick of the establishment. Just really just tired of teachers. Like they get on my nerves so bad, to be very honest with you, that like I'm sick of the occupation being about them, and I'm sick of the schools being about them, and I'm sick of it not being about my kids, my needs as a family. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a parent of multiples. We these stories are never told from my frame. They are always told from the frame of people who get paid to do this work, and everything's a grievance. I'm so sick of the grievance. So
yeah, but
sick of the we know best. We don't need any tests. Teachers know best. We're so devalued. We're so
No.
disarmed.
You're
You
switch. You're
hate us and
switching.
all
You're
that stuff.
switching. You're switching. Don't switch. Don't switch. Don't
That's
switch.
not switching. This is true. Like all of that has fatigued me to the point where it's
Okay.
like I don't expect anything else out of this. So when we're coming to these messy situations like right now, to me
Sure.
it's just like a combination of the same mess that's been going on all
Y-
along, just
You're
on
you're
steroids.
primed. You're primed to not give the benefit of the doubt to the teacher, which I understand and respect. But there is no mistaking that this the school building is a, an elevated risk for COVID that is different than any teacher signed on for when they got into this profession. It's not like there was that rhetoric going around earlier in the year. It was like, well, the nurses and the doctors are out there, and the teachers got to get out there too. And it's not the same.
That's not what the
It's
science tells us, though.
Well, the science is mixed.
It's mixed, but it doesn't tell us that there's an elevated risk in the classrooms. As a matter of fact, the teachers' unions aren't like paying attention. Like I agree with you wholeheartedly. If I was a teacher, you couldn't make me go do something I didn't want to do, right? Like if I just actually didn't want to teach anymore, or didn't want to put myself at a risk that I thought it was at, or if I was older or had someone at home who was older, the thought about going back into a classroom would not be real appealing to me. At the same time, I don't see a way in which I should be able to stop the system then from replacing me or still offering the student something. Like the students can't be on the hook for my decision.
Yeah, so I think that's where we could definitely agree is that the union is a symptom of a big system, right? I mean the like singles take care of their business in a community way, and so the bigger the system gets, the more you need, the more you quote unquote need, but I would argue has served a good historical purpose. You need something like a union, but that gets us to a place where like what you're saying is like, I guarantee you there are teachers in Chicago that are perfectly ready to go back to the building, but they're stuck, right? They're stuck in the union system where they can't cross some picket lines, or even if it's not a strike yet, they're crossing those lines, like et cetera, et cetera. And so the small, if we could smallify the system, we'd get into a situation where we could tailor make some more stuff, where we could figure out, okay, this teacher's willing to go to the building, like let's get them here. This teacher's going to stay home and teach remotely. Like it wouldn't have to be a one size fits all. That's what I'm trying to say, and that's what Chicago's stuck with, like this big, huge district trying to jam a solution through, because there
It
are
seems to
teachers.
me, the fairest thing to me, it seems like to do is if you wanted to go back and teach, fine. If you didn't want to go back and teach, fine. If you're a parent who didn't want your kid back in school, fine. If you're a parent
Yeah,
that did want your kids back in school, fine. Like accommodating as many parties as possible. If you wanted to bolt the system all together and take your education dollars with you, I think honestly that should be one of the compromises right now too. And I think this is where progressive kind of politics is like starting to hit its own. It's starting to eat itself in some ways. In this one way, a situation like this obviously exposes all the inequities between the rich and the poor, like
sure.
between what the rich and the poor can do. There's something like this that we're in right now with COVID, definitely a time to see those type of problems kind of come more naked. Like the rich are much more capable of doing some things right now than the poor are doing, which to me only makes the argument that I would normally have in normal times, which is that parents should be in control of those education dollars, even more urgent, because the families without any resources are being told, sit at home, wait, eventually we'll get back to you. We know that remote learning's terrible. We know that you're losing pace in it and your kids are getting depressed with it. But we can't offer you any type of assistance or any type of resources. Just sit
Well,
tight. That's really
I
kind of
I,
inequitable.
I'm going to push back against that. And there are teachers doing good creative stuff in reaching those kids. So I think the real problem here, there's two real problems. One, we should be vaccinating teachers by this point. It's insane that the vaccine was rolled out 2 months ago at this point, and
Yeah.
we've botched it so badly that we're demanding. We all have been calling teachers frontline workers since July, but yet we we're not going to get vaccinated until October at this point. So that's a tragedy. But the second thing is just what I said, is like the mismatch. Like there are plenty of kids in Chicago public schools that want to stay home, and they're going to stay home. And there are plenty of teachers that would be willing to come to the building, but they can't. It's information asynchronous or something. Like the union's not sharing the teacher information, and the school's not sharing the kid information, and they're like arguing about how to deal with this. And if it was a smaller district, if it was smaller, more local control, they could just be like, all right, Bill and Sam are going to come into the building, and Gina and Linetti are going to stay home, and then these kids come here, and then you could figure it out, safely. Because it is safe to be in the building and I've been saying this all along, when there's enough space and enough space, a few enough kids, and everyone's willing to wear a mask who's there, you probably will be fine. But it's when you run out of space issues and you also run into like mask compliance issues and stuff like that. That's a whole other thing.
Oh, there's so many other more things. All right, let's do this. Let's move on for Chicago, because I think Chicago is the armpit of American teacher unionism.
Oh, come on. Okay.
It is. It really is. It's like it's the Saul Alinsky Chicago style school unionism that never has been about the kids. We have someone in the comments, Tanisha Peoples, who's in Chicago right now, and her quote is, "It's never been about the kids here." And
we can't argue with a Chicago.
She's actively trying to work on that and fix it. But for this show, we want to
wait. I want to say one thing. I want to push.
Okay.
I want to just one more thing.
All right. Do it. I'm gonna see how you're gonna rescue
some evidence that teachers. I read this article a couple weeks ago. I looked it back through today. I followed some threads and some data. There's some evidence that teachers in in-person schools are getting COVID at higher rates than the community at large. Now, they're not 100% sure that's related to school transmission or not, but the thought is the point is there is an elevated risk there. I want to stick up for any Chicago teacher out there. I'm not a risk factor. I mean, I'm 44 and healthy as I'm healthy, and I've got kids that are healthy and a wife that's healthy. I mean, like, I don't mind going to the building and feeling like, yeah, I might get COVID here at some point, but I'm not, I'm incredibly low risk for that.
I don't know whether there is or isn't the risk there. As a parent, honestly, I just don't care at this point. I'm sick of the arguments. So I just want to do what I have to do for my kids. I have 3 kids. I just really have to do for them what I can do. And I'm sick of the system finding all kinds of ways to keep arguing about dumb shit. Really.
Would you send yours to the system? Would you put yours in the building?
I mean, right now, where we're at right now, we have 3 different kids. I think it would be different for the 3.
Yeah.
Right? Like 1 for sure. Honestly, like if it looked like a safe pathway there, I think honestly 1 is just pining to get back into the social sphere and to see real people again. Right. So I have a mix. I have 1 that never wants to go back to school again. I don't think. And then 1 who doesn't want to do the remote, doesn't necessarily want to go back to school, and doesn't want to do the remote either, would prefer just to do homeschooling. And then a third one who I think actually really is just pining to get back in the building, right? And see real people every day and see live people. And it's possible that could happen after February in my district.
Okay.
It's possible that it's coming back. So
anyways, I'll say one more thing, just because I want to, because I do think that, I think it's a mess and there's losses everywhere. And I am both a teacher that's in the building and I'm happy to be there because, and I think if we did a volunteer at my district, I would volunteer to go in because like I said, I'm low risk. But my 8-year-old son was in school for like 2 days, in January, before a kid in his class popped a positive COVID test. So another 8-year-old. So people, that's one of those big myths, is that the kids aren't ever getting it. And another 8-year-old had COVID, and my son was a close contact and got stuck home for 2 weeks. And so there was about 6 days or so where we were all on, my whole family, where I kept going to work because this was my only option. And my other son kept going to school. but we had to like monitor all these symptoms, and I got a headache. I'm kind of prone to migraines anyway, but when I got my migraine, then I thought I was dying. Right. So like it was a really like stressful couple of days until we eventually just ended up getting him tested, and he was fine and my headache went away. I think it was just stress related. But my point is that, again, I just, it's so messy. It's so complicated. I'm happy to be in the building, and I'm happy to do that. But also, like, it's scary. And I respect any teacher with a kid, a wife, a spouse, a partner with a condition, a teacher with a condition, somebody who's pregnant or has a newborn or something like that. I mean, just so much. There's so much going on that it's a mess. It's a mess.
I can live with it. You know my thing. Like, I can live with it. I'm just so, like, I'm fatigued. Like, I'm just fatigued about the fights and the battles, and it just seems like you're never going to stop hearing this from me. It's just like, it just seems like teachers are a permanent grievance class. It's like all they do is bring grievance constantly. And you have to understand, like, I know that that doesn't sound right to people teaching. I know it doesn't sound right if you're in that profession, but you should do some reflection on the thought of that, right? Like we're so devalued, really, because every poll that comes out says that America reveres its teachers, loves its teachers. Every sentence about teachers starts with, "I love teachers, but," right?
Yeah, but there's a lot of
we're
buts.
not respected. We're not. There are a lot of buts, like any profession. That's called being a grown up, right? Like, I love accountants, but, I love attorneys, but. No one ever says that, really. No one says, "I love attorneys, but," I love EMTs, but, and they have some pretty, like, attorneys have pretty bad reputations, I think, in their occupation in some ways, right? Like, the ambulance chaser stereotypes and the shyster types and all that. So anyways, that's not what today's show was about. Today's show is about your article that you wrote called "A Simple Way to Self-Monitor for Bias." I'm going to put it up on the screen here so people can see it and get a look at what we're talking about. In Edutopia, a simple way to self-monitor for bias. Teachers concerned that they might be showing bias against students in marginalized groups can use a short checklist for self-assessment. And you have some setup here to the ideas, but then you have 5 areas to examine for bias. So my first question for you would be, number 1, where did this article come from? Like, out of you, like what prompted you to want to write it? And then 2, how did you decide on these 5 areas for bias to look at?
Well, so the actual list came from a presentation I gave at Georgia Mathematics Conference in October about race, racism, white teachers, implicit bias, prejudice. And it was kind of some action items at the end. And I had a much, much longer piece about this. And I kind of like scrammed it down to these 5 things because Edutopia has about an 800-word limit. And so that was about what I had room for. So it's really I mean, it's just a mix of like other people's thoughts and some common sense stuff and some research stuff. It's nothing revelatory. It's got the word "simple" in the title, so it's not supposed to.
Simple ways for bias. So let's jump in. The first one is around discipline. Research finds that Black students are punished in schools at disproportionate rates. It's worthwhile to investigate if this is true in our classes. And from there, you talk a little bit about. You have some examples like phone usage and out of seat time, volume levels, and you ask the question, how we handle these things is worth inspecting for bias. Why is that worth inspecting? Do you think that teachers are biased in the way that they're handling those issues?
Well, so I thought this was something that I was original to me, at least in like, I hadn't read it somewhere else. I mean, we know that stat about Black children being disciplined at just incredible rates compared to white children, right? And that's pretty well established. You're gone.
Nope.
You there?
Yeah.
So that stat about black children being disciplined at higher rates than white children, that's very well established. There's nothing objectionable about that. What I thought was interesting was the thought that as a teacher, you could track yourself. And in a larger version of this piece, I would give some advice about how to actually track yourself. Like how to actually go about the process of it. But you could track yourself, not just like giving kids detention, because I went to a school where we never gave kids detention. I mean, like it wasn't my children, my actual biological children are obsessed with detention because it's in all their like comic books and Calvin and Hobbes and Big Nates and stuff. But I'm not talking about just detentions and suspensions and those big acts of discipline, but I'm talking about that monitoring that teachers constantly doing, right? Constantly tapping the kid on the shoulder and telling them to put a phone away, or constantly like giving a kid the side eye because they're getting a little loud. And that's just part of managing a room. But the question to me is as a white teacher, how often are you tapping the black kid on the shoulder for his phone, and how often are you letting the white kid slide, right? And until you most white people think they're doing a good job in terms of being fair. Some white people don't care, but most white people think they're completely unprejudiced and everything's fair. But until you actually monitor yourself, managing the classroom, you don't know what you're doing. And I just think it's pretty self-explanatory that most white teachers are going to manage black children more than they're going to manage white children. I can't see how black children would be suspended more unless white teachers were also managing them more. Does that make sense?
Looking for things or looking for infractions.
Yeah. And small things. I'm talking about like when a white kid gets up and like stretches and is silly, like, do you say something to them? Or when the black kid gets up and stretches and is silly, like, do you say something to them? Like, I'm going to go ahead and argue that you probably do with the black kid more, which is how they end up in detention more, which is how they end up suspended more, because it's that broken windows theory of policing, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you crack down on the little stuff, like you keep away from the big stuff. But are we doing that to black children more? I'm going to argue we are, but that's not.
It feels like there's a preset that supposes that black people are more in need of regulation than anyone else. And, if you have that in your mind already, then of course, if you go into teaching and you're in a classroom, you're going to see that with kids more. All right. So discipline, that one I think is a little bit easier because I think most people agree that discipline is an area where black students are punished more harshly than other students. Your number 2 is calling on raised hands. And I don't know that I got this one as much. You say, who do we call on when they raise a hand to participate? There's a little ambiguity here, making this an obvious area for self-reflection. Don't be too hard on yourself. Ha! Says Jay Wamsted. Chris Stewart says, be as hard on yourself as you need to be. But basically, pay attention instead to moments when you are offered a choice. As a bonus for my fellow male teachers out there, tracking this behavior could also help uncover gender bias in practice too. Is this just a thing about like not calling on your favorite all the time, your favorite student constantly?
Yeah, so there's a huge this got pushed back a little bit because some teachers offered me all these like solutions about how to randomly call on students. And I know how to randomly call on students. That's part of like teacher school is we have all these tricks about, popsicle sticks or names in a hat or you roll dice and that's never really that I'm not here to debate the merits of randomly calling on students versus deliberately calling on students. I am going to argue that teachers make choices to engage with students all day, whether it's, and some people on Facebook were pushing back, kids don't raise hands in my class. I was like, well, they're okay, but they're getting your attention in some way and you're engaging them. And who are you engaging with? I think it's a safe question. If you're engaging way more often with white kids than black kids, and that's disproportionate, that's a problem. If you're engaging way more often than with girls than boys, that's a problem, or boys than girls. I mean, it's a pretty, to me, self-explanatory, and yet some people they want to solve it by just, I just roll dice. I only call in. I just roll dice. I have a sheet 1 through 24, and I'm just like, that's not. I don't know about that.
So then your next one kind of relates to that one a little bit. Your number 3 is on cold calling. If you're anything like me, sometimes you call on a student not because they are offering a comment or a question, but because you think they aren't paying attention. And your point here is kind of like it's like a gotcha. Like,
Yeah.
catch somebody half sleeping or dazing off and you call on them so that they have to call to attention and they somehow might even embarrass themselves because they don't know what's going on or something maybe.
Yeah, and
Um,
I did it today. I mean, I literally, I caught myself today because I was thinking about this article, but I was just in the middle of a sentence about something, and I was like, "Don't you agree, Jose?" And like, I just like pointed at Jose, and Jose was like looking at his phone, and he looked up at
yeah.
me, and I mean, I think most teachers do that. I'm not saying they have to, but the question is if I'm always doing it to Jose or kids that look like Jose,
Hmm.
or who am I letting slide when I can see they're not paying attention, and who am I constantly trying to call out? Like,
Some of this, though, it feels like it supposes that you have a mixed classroom. So, like, what if you're a teacher in a classroom where all the kids are black? I mean, so you're just really, in that case, calling on your favorites, maybe, but it's not a black white thing or it's not a bias thing. It just, everybody in the classroom is black, but you tend to call on some of the same kids all the time. Am I right to say that, like, some of these things are meant for teachers in classrooms where they have a choice between a white
yes.
student and a black student?
Well, so this is what I couldn't get into in the article also, but if you go back to my frame, it's a little story about a principal that and so I was teaching in an all black school. And my principal, who was black and very well respected at the building, we were just talking and chatting about, school stuff. I mean, we were working, but it was like, and he somehow turned to me at some point and just said, "Wamsted, the only problem with you is you don't know how to handle some of these black boys."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my room was entirely black. And I think I had done what a lot of white teachers in environments like that do is I said to myself, they're all black. Like I'm treating everybody the same because everyone's black. Like I gave myself a pass. I don't have to think about race at all because the room is all black and it's all the same, right? And my principal believed, and I think rightfully, feel like you cut out again. So my principal believed, and I think rightfully, that I was treating some black boys differently than other black boys. And I explained this to somebody. Somebody asked me, like, "Well, what were you doing?" Like, because that's not in the piece. Because again, 800 words. But I think what I was doing is that I was the more. I mean, this is part of a larger conversation, but I was a very typical white person that grew up around mostly white people and had never really been in a room with mostly black people until I started teaching in a mostly black school at 30. And I think the more a black boy conformed to the teenagers that I remembered from my own teenage years, which were all white, the easier I treated them because I felt like I knew them better. I understood them better. And so if a kid liked my kind of music, like could be easier on him, or if he was less stereotypically black, and that's a whole mess of a conversation. But whereas the more a kid might conform to somebody a black kid I'd seen on TV, or a black kid I'd seen in a movie, which was most of my engagement and most white people's engagement before they get in the classrooms. It took me a year out from that conversation with my principal to kind of figure that out. But so my point is just this tiny article might not be helpful for a white teacher in an all black school, but I believe the white teacher in an all black school has their own issues also. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't come down to just being about you making better treatment of a white kid in your class versus a black kid in your class, because if there are no white kids in your class, you still can need help.
Yeah,
still have problems. Okay.
Yes, it's not as simple as just being like, oh, this kid's got dark skin, this kid's got light skin, I treat him different. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, they might be as simple as that, but that's not. It's more complicated than that. It's about the white person's, just their muscle memory for black people and what they have experienced before that time, right?
Mm-hmm. So the number 5 that you have on here, or number 4 on here, is this kid is in the wrong class. So tell me more about that one as a thing that you should monitor as a teacher, the sentiment, this kid is in the wrong class.
Yeah, I love that one because that was one that that was my own idea. So research obviously shows that Black children are disproportionately tracked downwards in school, and that's been true time out of mind. That Black kids with similar grades will get tracked downward, similar test scores will get tracked downward from the white kid, and that's obviously in a mixed school or whatever. And this to me felt like the discipline question, because I think it would be easy for a teacher to be like, well, I'm not in charge of class placement. Like that has nothing to do with me. They read that statistic and they're like, well, it's a small argument, but I could expand upon it. I would argue that teachers, especially middle and high school teachers, walk around the room all the time and we think to ourselves, this kid should be in a lower level of this class, or this kid should be in honors, or somebody asked us to write a letter of recommendation and we're like, ooh, I can't wait to do that, or ooh, I don't want to do that. And we're constant, and I'm not even talking about like special ed versus non-special ed. I'm just talking about like, oh, this is a upper class and that kid should be in a lower class. And we have those gut reactions all the time to children. And sometimes they're just validated based on how much math the kid knows. I'm not saying every time a teacher thinks that it's necessarily bad. What I am saying is that if a teacher monitored themselves and found that they were always thinking that about Black children or about a certain type of Black children and never thinking that about white children, then that teacher has a problem. And I'm going to argue that, again, if Black children are constantly tracked downwards, that's not an end user thing. That has to start with the teacher, and it has to start with those flashes of feeling that the teacher feels. And it would be a place for an interested teacher to examine themselves. Does that make sense?
It does.
Too wonky?
Well, no, I just think that it is a thing that we never get to the bottom of. Like, people have been saying for decades that black children are tracked into lower performing tracks. There was a report that came out not long ago, TNTP, I mention it all the time, called the opportunity myth. And that the finding in that was that the majority of Black students are denied access to grade level curriculum that they're qualified for, like the level at which. And this came after them studying thousands, I forgot how many, it was like tens of thousands of lessons given to students. And that was their finding, was that, the majority of Black students are in classrooms where they're being denied access to grade level assignments. And I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but the number of assignments that they are being given that are 2 and 3 grade levels below what they're actually capable of doing is like endemic. It's like a pandemic of low expectations. It blew me away that it didn't get more attention, that the report didn't get more attention. But this point that you're making, this kid is in the wrong class, I think relates to a mindset that could drive the idea that these kids get, below grade level learning, because, mindset is important. The mindset of people, the mindset of an institution, of a school, can make all the difference, I think, in a kid's life.
Yeah, so I heard, I can't remember who it was. It was on Eight Black Hands a couple of weeks ago. Was it a Derek? He was in HR, and it sounded like he was in HR in some place. Maybe it was not Derek. Tilson? What?
Oh, Dirk.
Dirk.
Tillison.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Tillison. Dirk. Okay.
Yeah.
He was telling a story about how in interviews they started asking, "Do you believe all children can learn?" Right? And
was DeRay.
Oh, DeRay. Okay.
That was DeRay McKesson. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just mixing up. Episodes. Okay.
That was DeRay McKesson, who actually he spent some time here. He was the human capital person in Baltimore,
in Minneapolis.
But then he was in Minneapolis as a human capital person in charge of hiring teachers.
And so he was saying
that failed that question. That's what was the big deal.
Yeah, and so I thought it reminded me that I've only had 2 teaching interviews. I taught one place for 14 years, and I'm in my second school now. But 6 months or a year ago, when I interviewed for this school, the principal asked me that. So it must be a thing spreading out now. And she's Black, and our school is largely Black and brown. And she asked me that, and we had a conversation about it. And it struck a chord when he said that. I wonder if that's a common thing, if it's just like happenstance that she asked me that, or if it's like protocol. But this is my point in bringing it up. And what it made me think of was those. I think teachers, like, it's like you know what questions coming or whatever, right? And so a white teacher or a black teacher, I mean, a teacher going into an environment like that might be ready for that question at this point, right? And my point is that just a teacher thinking upstairs that, of course, I have high expectations, of course, I believe all children can learn, is different than when rubber meets the road and they actually get in the classroom and the way they actually interact with the black and brown children in front of them, right? It's just like all things to do with race. It's what you say bears little resemblance to how you act often. And that's kind of
what the majority of the American public tell pollsters about their racial beliefs is way different than what they actually do in their life.
Yeah. And
so
that to me,
there's a disconnect.
Yes, that people don't see, that I do believe the interested I guess this is just my own experience also, is like I believe that for a couple years I was operating out of a naive quasi-colonialist mindset, and it took a couple years of me like watching myself and thinking and writing and exploring what was going on, even in an all black space, that changed my practice and made my actions match my rhetoric. My rhetoric was fine. I knew what to say, and I actually believed it. But did my actions match it? My principal would say no. He would say, no, you treat a certain kind of black kid differently. And I was like, what? But I think he was right. And it just took me a while to like figure that out through work.
Which that relates to your last point. So your last point is around good times. That's the headline of the last point that you should monitor. Tell me about good times. Like, is this teachers having favorites, or is this teachers, the kids that tell you, oh, Mr. So-and-so, you're not like the other teachers, you're cool, or something like that.
Yeah.
And you buy into that to the point where what happens when you buy into the good times thing?
Well, I mean, I think the good times thing is good. I just think it's worth like watching who those good times come with, right? I mean, like, and there's always going to be like certain students in the room that you just have more affinity with, and there's going to be kids that like you more than others. And I mean, and a teacher is a liar if they say that there's not some kids that they just like more than others. I mean, it just is. Like, you can like all children and love all children and still be like, well, that kid makes me laugh, right? And I guess that's my point, is like if it's always the same kids you're talking about the NFL with on Monday morning, and it's always the same kids that are making you laugh, and it's always the same kids that you go home and tell your partner, oh, the kids did the funniest thing, and Billy and Sammy and Ricky and Bobby, and it's all the white kids and never any of the black kids. Like, maybe you don't know how to relate to black children, right? Because if black children don't ever make you laugh, like, you're doing something wrong. And I don't mean laugh at them. I mean laugh with them. If you're not ever like enjoying the black children in your room the same way you enjoy the white children in your room, then something's wrong with you.
Yeah. So we've gone through these several things for teachers to monitor in terms of bias. If I had to ask you a tough question, like what percentage of teachers in the classroom do you think are straight up racist? What would you say? I
would first dodge that by saying what.
Don't dodge it.
It's what depends on what we mean by racist.
You wouldn't need a definition of what we mean by racist if we were just like talking about racism and not teachers. Just like racism, like if I said what percentage of the American public or the police department,
like storm the Capitol racist. I mean, or voted for Trump but aren't racist.
Well, we know like a third of the teachers voted for Trump, apparently. Like that
sounds right.
That's something the union said, was that a third of their members voted for Trump. So
let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you think voting for Trump disqualifies you to be a teacher of black and brown children?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not for everybody, not for all black children, just for mine. It's like you can teach anybody else you want. It's a free country. I think you vote for who you want to vote for. That's between you and your God. I just don't want my kids being taught by people who believe that ingesting Clorox defends you against a pandemic, right? Like I actually want my kids taught by people that think, right? Like and you have to be like, this is the thing where I become very harsh. Like, there's no other way for me because I am so sick of thinking people hedging their bets and pulling back on things or making mea culpas or half-hearted kind of like conditions and qualifiers for things that don't deserve qualifiers and conditions and whatnot, right? Like, if you were to ask me the percentage of teachers that are straight up racist, I would say the majority. I would say like racism is like the air that we breathe in the United States. It's hard to get away from it. It's like asking, what is the number of fish that are touched by water? Right?
Well,
Like,
and you said something super nasty a couple weeks ago on Eight Black Hands. You said, yeah, you said, I totally forgot.
Prince lyric or what?
I no, super mean. That's the. I meant to write it down and ask you about it, so I'm glad I just remembered. But you said a third of teachers voted for Trump, and then you said, even interrupted someone to say, you said, and 2/3 of them are lying about it. That's what you said. Yeah. Does that sound like okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah, because that's another thing.
We're not all bad, Chris.
Well, like another thing you see in polling is that that also people lied about that too. Right, like the number of people that actually voted for Trump actually is higher than the number that admit to, for instance. So I don't listen. Let me answer voted for Trump. I'm okay with it if you voted for Trump.
I didn't vote for Trump.
I want to I just want to put that out there. It's not against you. I just think as Americans, we all should be able to have a choice about who teaches our kids, what they teach them, where they teach them. Should just be. And if you are black and you are smart, you're not listening to white people about what's best for your kids, because you're going to be led astray because we just went through a whole thing about bias here with you. And I spent a portion of my day today hearing from a couple of white teachers that beating up on the teacher's profession is, by calling out white women teachers, is sexist in itself. Just to call out the role that they participate in a racist system of which they haven't done the hard work of interrogating the system that pays them and gives them a pension. So they don't even know the role that they're playing within a system that is miseducating, many black children. I don't expect anybody if you're not a black male with multiple kids in the school system paying taxes, I don't expect you to have that type of worldview or that have done that level of interrogation about the thing that you're putting your kids on. You can have the luxury of thinking, no, it's not as bad as all that and as bad as you say and blah, blah, blah. As prisons are loading up with black people, it's just a few bad apples on the police departments. They're not all bad, blah, blah. Listen, save that. Save that for your aunts and your uncles who over Thanksgiving are talking about the Negroes in ways that we all know that they're talking about the Negroes. And let us just be honest with ourselves, because we're at the wrong end. We're at the business end of a long-term problem with racism, right? We're at the wrong end of it. So we have to have some sort of realistic analysis. The realistic analysis is, especially with teachers in this conversation we're having even like right now, many teachers going to DEI type things. They're doing PD around trying to get rid of their colonization and their bias and all those things. They must also believe that there's a problem if they're doing that. Like they must believe something's in there, right? If they're doing that.
So I had a little. So first, let me go back and answer your question about. I think the number of straight up storm the Capitol racists that are teachers is not huge. Only because I think that the number of straight up storm the Capitol racists among white people in America isn't huge. It's not a massive number. I don't have that in front
Yeah, what would be your estimate on that number?
of me, but people say they're not racist, and it's their underlying beliefs that manifest that racism, right? Now those people in the teaching force, I think, are legion, only because I think most white people are like that. I think most white people, we know what to say. We've been raised in such and such a way. I think people my age were raised to not talk about it. And then people younger than about 25 were raised to think it wasn't a problem because I've got a couple of black friends and I watch YouTube all day. And we've both been, and people my parents' age, like, they don't even know. That's just a whole other thing. Like when you're in your, that generation. But I think most of us have been raised so we know exactly what to say, and we think things are fine, and we think that what we say is true. But beneath, we're exhibiting those biases that are like, calling it implicit bias is kind of a kind way to talk about racism and prejudice, right?
Sharif hates that. Sharif says he hates like words like subconscious bias or those things, because he's like, you're conscious of it. Like, give it up, knock it off, please. Like, stop gaslighting us. Like, we're being gaslit by our teachers in a way that actually is just weird, because we're turning our kids over every day to people. And this is what I honestly believe too. I do think there's other side to this story. I do think that there are teachers that I've encountered who have said privately to me things like, you don't see what I see every day. You can talk all that, like black nationalist stuff you want about your kids and blah, blah, blah. But I'm seeing kids come in my classroom where the parents don't care about their education at all. And it's really ghetto and blah, 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 blah. This is stuff that a teacher might tell you privately. Like, I might be a little bit needing of work and racism or whatnot, but you and your people need a lot of work on the kids that you're sending us and whatever. It wouldn't be uncommon to even hear that from a person of color in the teaching ranks, which to me just screams classism, racism, positional leadership has just kind of, it's poisoned the well for like a fair teaching or a fair learning opportunity for many of our kids. They're not even in a fair environment, so it's hard to say how they might do better. Like, like there's something about being middle class and teaching underclass kids versus working class kids versus middle class kids versus upper class kids,
Well, and most teachers kind of de facto are middle class. I mean, a lot of them come in with a lot of debt,
but they're educated by by normal standards. They're formally educated.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
They're kind of the gateway to the middle class in a way.
Yes. It's an interesting place. I find myself all the time in conversations like it's the kind of occupation where the guy that comes to like do my termite inspection, like when he hears I'm a middle school teacher, like he kind of feels like we're on the same level, right? But yet I have 3 college degrees also. So when I meet like a lawyer, I feel the same level as him. I'm not intimidated by lawyers and doctors, but also like the termite guy's not intimidated by me either. It's a weird in-between profession is I'm just saying.
So do you want to get back now to the question of questions? If you had to estimate the American teachers, what percentage are straight up racist? What percentage are low key racist but don't know it? And what percentage are racism free and woke, like, decolonized completely?
Well, I'm going to add a third category of like
a fourth. Those are 3. So
a fourth. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was putting it in the third spot. So there's like straight up racist, says they're not, but they really are.
Yeah.
Low key racist. I want to put a like thinks they're woke, but have done just some small amount of work. So I think I think that on the edges is vanishingly small. I think the straight up racist is small, and I think that's the actual like really actually woke, where they've done the work upstairs and it also is carried out in their body on a daily basis, I think is small. I think the number of white people that can walk the walk in addition to talk the talk in a instinctual automatic way is small. So I think like I wouldn't put myself there yet. I would.
So when you say small, would you say like 20%?
Oh no, I would.
Even smaller than that.
I mean, yeah.
Straight up racist, you think is less than 20% of the teaching force?
Yeah, because I think it's less than 20% of white Americans. So I just So this is what, let's do this.
What?
Wait, but again, straight up racist. By straight up racist, we're defining people that would, like, on a multiple choice test, click black people are inferior to white people.
Yeah.
Black people are not as smart as white people. Black people are, so like that. I think most people know better than to say that, even in the privacy of their own, like, multiple choice test. Let's do this. Let me do some research on this, and let's come back to this, because I think this question is so important, because I think there's a future for the white teacher, but I think because we have to, we need to bust some unions. We need to like shrink the school districts. We need to prop up charters. We need to pump into choice, all those things, but we need to fix the white teacher also. Like, there's just too many of us, and the pipeline for black and brown teacher talent is not ready yet. It's just like looking around if you looked around at your really crummy NFL team, you can't just go, well, we'll just draft our way out of this. You're not going to draft your way out of it. You got to fix what you got in some way too. And so we got a lot of crummy white teachers that we need to fix. And I want to come back to your question, because I'm going to do some research and answer it really well.
So, but right now, this is what I would still ask of you, though, is answer it before you do that, so then you can compare after you do your, because like, this is what I can say for sure. When you do your research, if you go to Pew, they do like pretty regular polling on lots of different things, American attitudes about the post office and American. So if you go back, you'll even find, how racial attitudes have changed about interracial marriage and stuff like that. So you'll be able to see, like, there's a percentage of Americans that remain true that we've gone too far in helping blacks. Blacks are more of their own problem than they admit, and stuff like that. That's a core group. So that number is bigger than the number you just gave me. Like, that percentage of folks that consistently think things like, being white is now a disadvantage is larger than it had ever been before, right? Like, kind of.
Okay. So here's my numbers.
Yeah, here's your numbers. Okay, let's hear them.
All right. You can mark this.
So for people listening, this is the question that Jay is answering, put on the record so that he can come back later and figure it out. So the number of teachers, the percentage of teachers that you think are straight up racist.
So I'm gonna do all four categories.
Okay. All right.
I'm gonna say that I think the percentage of actually super woke, like inhabit in their bodies, anti-racist teachers is people. I'm just gonna say people. You want to do teachers? 5%. I'm gonna say the number of
5% of teachers are what now?
They inhabit anti-racism automatically. It's not work. They've done the work and they're just living out.
These are you're going from the good side, coming back.
Yeah, I'm coming from the good side. I'm 5%.
5% of teachers are the straight up anti-racists.
And because they've done the work, and the work lives in them. Percent of teachers are maybe 20 to 25 are working on it. They really want to be anti-racist. They recognize there's a problem and they're actively fighting it. I'm going to say that something like 55% of teachers are just a little bit racist. They know what to say, but they do the wrong thing. And 15% are straight up racist.
Straight up hardcore.
15, 55, 25, 5. Yep, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, so wait. 5 are the woke, done the work. They've done the work. 15% after them are the ones that are what now?
20. I'm giving 25. 25 are
okay.
Yeah.
Are what?
They know there's a problem with race and they're working on it. They're eager to work on it. Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, you're thinking that 70% of the teachers are in the wrong zone.
Well, but encouragingly, I think 55% of them could. That's the 55% I want to talk to, right? Like the ones that think they know what to say, but they don't know they're not walking the walk.
Yeah.
Right. I think there's hope for them. I'm still
going to stick with the number that you have just said. The biggest number, the majority of teachers aren't on the right side of the spectrum when it comes to this. And what I'd say about that is this. Imagine it's late at night, you're African American, you're
Mhm.
driving home from dinner, you get pulled over, you realize that you're in a spot between your house and this new place that you went to eat to dinner that is a little bit off the beaten path. It's actually not straight up like an urban street that you're used to. You're a little bit off the beaten path because you went to get, crab cakes at this place that's a little off the beaten path, and here you are now on the side of the road or whatnot. And there's a 70% of the chance that the person pulling you over is one of the police officers that that the FBI has told us for years has infiltrated law enforcement from white supremacist groups. And from the first interaction, you get kind of a cold feel about it or whatnot. Um, that is different
Yeah.
than a white person being pulled over in that car in that same situation, in level of what's the chemical that goes up your back when you sense like there's a trouble? Is it like cortisol or something? Or
I know what you're talking about. I don't
yeah,
know.
it's something that like, so you're having a different physical reaction,
Yeah.
I think, in that moment than you and I would be having a different physical reaction in that moment. I just apply that to schools, like at the beginning of the year. Is this what especially when you have multiples and you got multiple teachers and you have one kid that has even more multiple teachers, like you have two kids like I do that have one teacher each,
Hmm.
but then you have another kid that has like four or five teachers for the day. And any one of those could be part of your 70% that are in the wrong part of the spectrum. It's just a different chemical response that I have about these issues that makes it less intellectual for me.
Yeah. I
Makes it way less. And I heard you earlier in this conversation, you said, benefit of the doubt, like benefit of the doubt for the teacher. That's tough.
yeah.
It's like a hard one because it's almost like saying benefit of the doubt for that cop or benefit of the doubt. I mean, man, we haven't really talked about this yet. Like when you talk about storm the Capitol types, we talk about the fact of how many doctors, teachers, police
Yeah.
officers, now law enforcement, a few military people were in that crowd, right? And you might have been somebody who was teaching my kid the next day. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I want to be clear. Like, I don't think it. I can't imagine why you would give any random white person the benefit of the doubt, or even someone that you have known, or me for that matter. I
No,
just like,
there's some I would give the benefit of the doubt.
yeah, sure,
I
people
very
you
much
know.
believe in Quakers, right? So the
Okay,
Friends are my white people. Those are my
they
people. Like
they
I would give them 100% credit
they
for what
were
they
they
went
were
through,
really early on that abolition movement. They were like 1600s fighting
and
against it. Yeah,
consistent as hell about it,
yeah, I
right?
know. Yeah.
You know.
Okay, right. But aside from the Quakers, the Mennonites, yeah. So I mean, and that's hard. I think most it would offend them to think that you weren't giving them the benefit of the doubt. And I don't think all of those are bad people. I just think they're people that like they don't know. Can I ask you a question before you go?
Yeah.
Um, you've said so many things. It's reminded me of a book I just read, and it's by a therapist in Minneapolis. I don't know if he still lives in Minneapolis,
Hmm.
and I can't even say his name. It's Resmaa Menakem.
Hmm.
It was a book called My Grandmother's Hands. You don't know him. You don't know him. I thought he's a.
Say the name again.
I'm gonna put it in the chat. It's African. He changed his name. It means something. They both mean something. I don't know what they mean though. I don't remember. So I'm not even sure how that's pronounced. I would say Resmaa, I suppose.
I think it's funny that were you about to ask me, is this my guy? Like, is
No,
this?
no, 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 no. I mean, he's a Minneapolis. He works.
Mm-hmm,
He's a
mm-hmm.
minute. He's a black therapist who lives in Minneapolis and wrote an excellent book about how racism, both on the white and black, has embedded itself in our bodies over time. And I just read this book; it's just fascinating. And
I do
you've
know
said
him.
several things about you do
Actually,
or
I don't
don't.
know. Yeah, I don't know him like, closely. So I used to lead a group called the African American Leadership Forum, and I think he was one of our members,
Okay.
actually. Yeah, long time ago. Um, wow. I mean, listen, that forum that I'm talking about that he was part of had lots of African Americans in it that were either trauma counselors or
Yeah.
doctors of one sort or another. Definitely a lot of thinking went on there about how do we get our kids into a totally healthy situation. So we had groups that were around healthcare, groups around criminal justice.
Yeah.
We had multi-economic justice, but when it came to education, an agenda around just getting better instruction, better teaching, all those things. But there was also a well-being agenda within education. How do we get Black kids into a healthy situation? And one of the ways to do that is to get them out of the hands of people who haven't themselves actually done the work to interrogate whether or not they're doing harm, whether or not they are part of the harmful part of education. And I would honestly say that's the majority of teachers right now. Right. And the way that teachers interact with me as an adult, like even today on Twitter, I can't tell you how annoyed I am to know that these are the people teaching our kids, just the way they approach me sometimes. I'm not approaching them. They jump in my timeline and say things just like, you're wrong. You don't even know what you're talking about. Let me school you on this thing. And it's funny because the thing that they're about to school me on when they start talking, I know more about it than they do, and definitely more than they think I know. But I just go with it. And in the end, I just say, the assessment you just made of me is the assessment you're making of our kids every day, right? This I know best. I know better. I don't have to check my whiteness at the door. I don't have to check my middle classness at the door, or even my female white middle classness talking to a grown ass black man. I don't have to check any of that at the door. And my thought about that is, I don't give a damn if you do that to me. I expect you to do that. Thank you. You just actually confirmed everything I know about you, right? This is our history together. But the fact that you're going to go into a classroom tomorrow and practice that same sense of superiority with our kids is the thing that I'm worried about. And I think it happens more than we know. And I think I saw something yesterday about, like, people are starting to come up with all these different variants of racism. So one, apparently I did not read the book White Fragility. Have you read this book? What's her name? Robin something or other?
Have I read White Fragility? Is that what you said? Oh, yeah. I mean, that's
the thing that I had not read out of there was called adversive racism or adverse racism.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like the racism that you have when you're on the left and you don't think you have any racism.
Right.
So it's like, the kind practiced by woke white liberals. That's mostly, I think, we didn't talk about that tonight. We were talking about, when I said straight up racism, we were thinking the Trumpites, but we weren't thinking.
And there's probably a fifth category right here of, like, teachers that think they're woke and done the work, but have stopped working because they think they've arrived. And, like, I think that number's much bigger than you and I we'd be chagrined, I think, at that number.
But Jay, they read Lisa Delpit.
Hey, please don't knock Lisa Delpit.
They went to see Chris Emdin at a show once, and they know a lot now. They read White Fragility. I don't know what the newest one would be, but they've probably they're probably 2 or 3 years in of these authors. What wouldn't they know by now?
Well, and that's, I mean, like, again, the piece I wrote was super small, but that to me is, like, what's so important is that this is there's just more than reading some books. And I read books for years. I mean, I still read books all the time. I mean, like, books are important. Articles are
like
important.
You were saying, I used to read lots of books.
I used to read books. I remember. No, I mean, like, books are important. Learning is important. You listen to podcasts. You interact with people on social media. You watch shows. All that's important. But until you either invite someone into your room to just watch you and give you unvarnished feedback, and which as teachers, we just mostly don't have the opportunity for that. Or you start filming yourself, or you got to have some kind of self-monitoring mechanism. And until you do that, like, you're not taking that next step. Like, I could read 100 books about racism, but if I'm not taking that into the actual, like, classroom in a conscious way, it's just going to stay here. It's not going to get here. And that's what this book by this therapist, like, really, like, talks about, is the way our bodies inhabit the racism. It's more than just brain.
All right. Well, final words here. Final
Okay.
thoughts. We started the show with the story about Chicago and how much of a mess that is in terms of whether we should go back or not go back, and the teachers union saying that pushes to put kids back in school is rooted in racism, sexism, and misogyny. And then we went into your work around simple ways for teachers to self-monitor for bias in the classroom, assuming that teachers think that they have that in their classroom.
Right.
My final word on it is I want complete control over my kids. I don't want to wait for teachers to become anti-racists. And I think more of them are racist than think that they are. I think they're all really bad for the public. I definitely think, the Malcolm X quote that only a fool turns their kids over to their enemy and expects them to become educated is as true as it ever was.
Yeah.
And I just don't think we think in those terms. You probably have heard me say this before. Years ago, when I was a vegetarian, I used to get the PETA magazine, and one of the factoids I had never heard before was that humans are the only species that drinks another species' milk. And I had to ponder on that for a while. I just sit around and be like, wait, that can't be true. And I thought about animals suckling, and I thought, yeah, but no, they're sticking within their species or whatnot. It's a crude analogy, but I don't think that white people are waking up every day handing their kids over to black people for their education in the world. I don't know that that would be a bad idea if they did, to be very honest with you, but they certainly aren't doing that. But we are doing it, black people.
Yeah.
And some of us are doing it out of a sincere belief that people have the best in mind for our kids, and to some extent, I think they do. I just don't think that what they think is, I think they have the best of intentions, but what their best of their best intentions are not good enough for what our kids deserve. They would need to level up 4 or 5 levels up to fix the historic dehumanization that our kids have faced, not just through the education system, but through multiple systems, right? They're going to face it in multiple places. So if the idea was, where do we put our kids where they could be the most healthy? I just don't think that this is it yet. And I would just love the government to give me my money. I'm a taxpayer, and the taxes that I pay are not insignificant in their size. So I would just love the government to give me my per pupil dollars back for my kids and let me design a program that really works for them while white teachers work on themselves and figure it out. Totally willing to come back. Let's check in a couple of years, right? After some massive retraining program.
Yeah, that's one of the things this guy talks about in this book is the need to white people. We want our black friend to tell us how to be, or we want kind of a black tour guide to guide us through race and racism. We want I wrote an article recently where I took Spike Lee's "We Want a Magical Negro" to come in and give us all the wisdom of that character. But the reality is that this is work that we got to do, and we need to be engaging with black scholarship and black writing, and certainly with black people, but they can't do that for us, and that's what too many of us want that. So I'm with you. My final word would be, still want to talk to you about all this tax dollar stuff, but that's a whole nother show too. We'll come back to, I'm going to do some research on white people and straight up racist numbers. I'm really interested in this super woke number too now. And my last word is just going to kind of be what it always is, that I have hope for some white teachers, and I'm going to keep working for them.
You're going to keep helping them out, help them see the way, and be on the path.
Trying. I'm doing my best.
I appreciate it. I know that I'm caustic in what I have to say, what my message is. And I think it's because I'm so committed to not varnishing what I see to be as brutal in terms of the truth. So the way that I speak actually, to me, matches the energy of the problem with our kids, the hostility that is their problem. Jonathan Kozol named his book Savage Inequalities, right? He didn't name it kind of inequalities or mostly bad inequality or whatnot. He called it savage,
Yeah, yeah.
which that's pretty strong language, right? Like, so that's where I come from when I speak so harshly about all these things. But I appreciate you continuing to to educate and reflect and make it a thing and talk about it as a thing. So at least it's on people's radars to talk about it as a thing. What I know from having led Brightbeam and Education Post is that oftentimes the type of thing that you wrote, and this is something we should also come back to, the type of thing you wrote gets us really interesting feedback sometimes.
Yeah.
And we had a piece, which, I'm going to share this with you because I wanted to invite you in to talk about this at another time. But we had a piece written by a black woman in New Orleans, and her piece was about we do so much talking about black pathology, but when we see people storming the Capitol and beating people up and cops doing things that they shouldn't be doing, we don't. When are we ever going to talk about how we train white kids to not grow up to be those people, right?
Yeah.
And that piece got circulated at a school in New York, a white school in New York, and one of the parents in that school was Megyn Kelly. So Megyn Kelly got mad that that Education Post piece was being passed around by the teachers at her son's school. She made a big stink of it, so she pulled her kid out of it and wrote a big piece about it. And
Wow.
the virality of that caused so much hate mail to the woman who wrote it in New Orleans that she had to shut down some of her social media stuff to just be safe. And and it's times like that where I just wonder, where are the white allies? Like, she shouldn't have to be facing this all on her own, this type of pushback. But it was viral, and the pushback was nasty and loud, and a lot of it. So maybe I'll bring you back into that discussion at another time.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
All right, everybody, thanks for watching and for listening. We know that we're inconsistent with this version of our talks of talking across lines with Jay Wamsted. And the Unpublic is a new series of conversations that are meant to break new ground or to talk about success or failure or what is possible for our kids more than studying failure. The Unpublic show runs now on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 9 a.m. just in its normal form with people that are doing great things. And then on Fridays every week, we have a special edition, which is the Freedom Fridays with Sharif El-Mekki. And we get to talk about things that connect Black history with our current Black reality. So catch us at any of those times. Please earmark us, share this with a friend. Me and Jay will be more consistent in our so-called white noise show that we used to have, but now this is a different version of it, and we'll share it with you earlier in the week so you can plan to watch it in advance. Thank you all so much.